Robert the Doll is an allegedly haunted doll exhibited at the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. Robert was once owned by painter, author, and Key West resident Robert Eugene Otto. The doll originally belonged to Robert Eugene Otto, an artist described as eccentric, who belonged to a prominent Key West family. The doll was reportedly manufactured by the Stiff Company of Germany, purchased by Otto's grandfather while on a trip to Germany in 1904, and given to young Otto as a birthday gift. The doll's sailor suit was likely an outfit that Otto wore as a child. The doll remains stored in the Otto family home at 534 Eaton Street in Key West while Otto studied art in New York and Paris. Otto married Annette Parker in Paris on May 3, 1930. The couple returned to the Otto family home in Key West to live there until Otto died in 1974. His wife died 2 years later. After their deaths, the Eaton Street home containing the doll was sold to Myrtle Reuter, who owned it for 20 years until the property was sold to the current owners, who operate it as a guest house. In 1994, the doll was donated to the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where it became a popular tourist attraction. It is annually rotated to the Old Post Office and Custom House in October. According to legend, the doll has supernatural abilities that allow it to move, change its facial expressions, and make giggling sounds. Some versions of the legend claim that a young girl of Bahamian descent gave Otto the doll as a gift or as retaliation for a wrongdoing. Other stories claim that the doll moved voodoo figurines around the room, and was aware of what went on around him. Still other legends claim that the doll vanished after Otto's house changed ownership a number of times after his death, or that young Otto triggered the doll's supernatural powers by blaming his childhood mishaps on the doll. According to local folklore, the doll has caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce and a cornucopia of other misfortunes, and museum visitors supposedly experience post-visit misfortunes for failing to respect Robert. The doll was exhibited at TAPSCon, a convention hosted by the Atlantic Paranormal Society held in Clearwater, Florida, in May 2008, marking the first time that it had left Key West, Florida, in its then 104 years of existence. In October 2015, the doll was taken to Las Vegas for a Travel Channel television program in Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum. The episode originally aired on April 2, 2016, as the first episode of Deadly Possessions, and re-aired on August 12, 2017, as the first episode of the series Ghost Adventures: Artifacts. A horror film franchise loosely based on the legend began with the film Robert, released in 2015. To date, 4 sequels have followed: The Curse of Robert the Doll in 2016, The Toymaker in 2017, The Revenge of Robert the Doll in 2018, and Robert Reborn in 2019. The doll and a replica doll sold at the gift shop at the Martello Museum appeared in the second season of Ozzie and Jack's World Detour. The doll was featured in an episode of the podcast and TV series Lore. Visitors must ask Robert politely if they want to take his photo. If they mock him or take his photo without permission, Robert is said to lay a curse on them. Good evening in the afternoon. And welcome to a new blog created by your favorite napkin, bringing you a case where only you will decide to believe in reality or in the paranormal. A man was killed in front of a public square in the municipality of San Nicolas de los Garza by at least 7 shots. The incident was reported around 9 p.m. at the intersection of Paraiso and Jacinto streets, in the Industrias del Vidrio neighborhood. It is believed that he was taken to the scene aboard a car, and his perpetrators shot him at point-blank range. He was on his back and with his arms extended in the shape of a cross. About 2 years ago, a series of videos gained great popularity on social networks because it shows how the radio signal from cars begins to distort as they approach a cross located on the side of the street. The phenomenon took place in the Colonia Industrias del Vidrio in the city of San Nicolas de los Garza, Nuevo León. As soon as the video appeared, the interest of citizens was aroused to visit the area and find out the veracity of the event. Thousands of cars have gathered every night, to tune into 690 AM and listen to the distorted sound of what appears to be a ghost ambulance. When the user Sammy Aron, motivated by the famous legend that is told around the Avenue Paraiso's crossing with Jacinto's in the popular colony Industrias del Cristal, decided to check the veracity of this on his own account by recording everything on video. According to what this famous myth narrates among the inhabitants of the region, it is that from the tragic death of a 29-year-old young man who died in that place in March 2014, it is possible to perceive strange distorted sounds apparently from an ambulance through of the radio receiving devices of the vehicles that pass through that avenue, just at the moment when they pass by the cross that remains in memory of that deceased man. Sammy would be in for a great surprise when conducting this experiment, because he did not imagine how clearly he could distinguish this terrifying event. Ghost Ambulance Original Video, Monterrey, Mexico. The video above is not the first to be shot. I have no idea which one is the original, however the reactions to the video are chilling. The next day, despite the fear he had felt the night before, he dared to return to that place, this time at dawn. He elaborated the same procedure as with the previous recording, but this time he decided to broadcast live via Facebook, finding that disturbing resonance again, but this time with a more macabre tone than the previous time. The videos did not take long to spread through social networks, and at this moment they are the subject of conversation of many believing and skeptical internet users of these topics who want to verify this strange incident for themselves.
Se dice que cuando llegas para allá, donde está la cruz, más o menos por donde va la camioneta aquella, se distorsiona este pedo y empieza a sonar una ambulancia. No se sabe si es verdad, pero bueno, se dice. Ahí vamos. Por allá está la cruz. Dale lento, más lento, más lento. ¡A la madre! Ahí está la cruz. Dale, dale.
Esto es una realidad absoluta. El mundo ahora está con
Ahí está la cruz.
Dimensión deportiva. Un enfoque diferente del deporte. Con Roberto Hernández Contreras, Víctor Manuel Hernández y Roberto.
Antitigre, pero no es de edad, es de calidad. Bueno, Wilson, ya, ¿verdad? Walter Ayoví es tan bueno como cualquier jovencito de los Rayados. Walter Ayoví es un ya no aguanta 90 minutos. No, pero Ayoví, aunque... Pero ni Cardona, por el amor de Cardona tiene 24. Cardona tampoco los aguanta. Pero no, te repito, no es la edad, hay jugadores que son muy buenos. Ojalá que tengan. O sea, ¿tú piensas que la defensa que aguanta otros 5 años? Creo que no, obviamente que no. Lo que yo te dije nada más es que en promedio, el sector defensivo de los Tigres, los 4 del fondo, son en promedio menos años que los del Monterrey. No es cuestión de edad, ayer yo pensaba que nada más bastante era el de Luis Fernando Fuentes Vargas, que viene de...
Vamos a regresar.
31 años, 31, no es un jovencito. Ahí sí me cagaron. 31 años. Antes ha estado en otros equipos, pero ya tiene 31 años, ¿eh? No, pues sí, ya me ganaste. Me dieron de Tigre, te la
Estación de radio. A ver qué pasa.
Oye, el juego pasado le dieron 8 a Rayados. 7 minutos, hay que darle a este clásico 125. A ver si Funes Mori mete el gol. El 122 de Rayados y se prende el clásico.
Pero con actividad física de los segmentos y articulaciones que no tienen problema. Pues ahora vamos a saludar, es casualidad, a otra jovencita de 11 años.
Sí, güey. No mames, güey.
Oye, ¿te escuchan? Escucha.
No mames, güey.
Dale.
¡Sí, no te idiota!
Dale para adelante. Dale para adelante, güey.
No mames, güey.
No mames. Esto fue ahí hardcore. Dale, calmado. No más.
In 2009, a Japanese reporter for a television show went through a long-abandoned hospital. The reason is, a man fell from the second story and died. From then on the building was deemed hazardous, and was reportedly haunted. The reporter in this show interviewed a man who had previously been injured from going in the hospital. This is what he said. Honestly, I don't remember anything. 4 of us from work got together. We went inside the hospital to test our courage. I was separated from them. Then it was so dark in the hospital. Don't you remember anything at all? At this point there is a long pause until the man says something. I think I saw something red, also in that hospital. I dropped my camera there. Aren't you going to get it back? I don't want to go back there again. And those are his final words for that interview. The reporter then goes to the hospital to investigate and to take pictures. When the reporter hears this, she seems very nervous. Throughout the investigation, the reporter is very scared and reluctantly going with this. After a while she takes her camera out in hopes that she will be able to get some spirit photos. After another minute or two she finds another camera. She goes through the pictures and seems deeply disturbed by what she sees. When she is done, she looks up and screams with the cameraman looking at a mirror. The footage cuts out to display this. This experience drove our reporter to a state of insanity. After slowing down the footage, we found out why. The show will come back playing the same scene as before in slow motion. The first time you might not notice it, but in the background there is a figure seen in the reflection of the mirror. They play it a second time and zoom in on the figure. The figure is wearing surgeon scrubs and had a white face with her soulless black eyes wide. The show cuts back where they ask the reporter what happened. They decide to wander on their own way. As the cameraman wanders on his own, he sees a group of doctors operating in the mirror, but when he sees the room that they are operating in, he finds nothing. He stares at the mirror for a short time where he looks at a ghostly surgeon holding what appears to look like a baby covered in blood and screams. The footage repeats but slowed down.
さあ、今日はちょっと怖いとこに来てます。こちらは数年前に倒産した病院なんですが、なんとこの中で写真を撮ると必ず不思議なものが映るということで、地元の若者たちの間で話題になっている場所なんです。その不思議なものっていうのは一体何だと思いますか？そうなんです。この建物は中に入ると必ず心霊写真が撮れる、そういう場所なんです。
正直あんまりよく覚えてないんですよね。バイト仲間4人で、肝試しに病院入ったんですけど、1人になんかなっちゃって、あとはもう真っ暗な病院の中で記憶が途切れちゃって。
かすかにでもちょっと記憶に残ってるようなことってありませんか？何か
赤いものが見えた気がしますね。
赤いものですか？
あとあそこの病院に自分のデジカメを落としてきましたね。
それは取りに行こうとはしてないんですか？
もうちょっと嫌ですね。
このように怪我人が出たということで、この建物は危険であると先週この廃病院の所有者が取り壊しを決定した曰く付きの場所なんです。嫌ですよ。写真撮ってくるんですか？この中入って。やめましょうよ。やだな、暗いな、怖いな。本当に心霊写真が撮れるかどうか、いくつか写してみたいと思います。
カメラ。
このカメラ、怪我をした男性が落としたカメラですね。何か不気味なものが映ってます。なんだろう。
あっちあっち。あれ誰かいる。
I first met in person with Mary E. in the summer of 2007. I had arranged with her husband of 15 years, Terrence, to see her for an interview. Mary had initially agreed, since I was not a newsman but rather an amateur writer gathering information for a few early college assignments and, if all went according to plan, some pieces of fiction. We scheduled the interview for a particular weekend when I was in Chicago on unrelated business, but at the last moment Mary changed her mind and locked herself in the couple's bedroom, refusing to meet with me. For half an hour I sat with Terrence as we camped outside the bedroom door. I was listening and taking notes while he attempted fruitlessly to calm his wife. The things Mary said made little sense but fitted with the pattern I was expecting. Though I could not see her, I could tell from her voice that she was crying, and more often than not her objections to speaking with me centered around an incoherent diatribe on her dreams, her nightmares. Terrence apologized profusely when we ceased the exercise, and I did my best to take it in stride. Recall that I wasn't a reporter in search of a story, but merely a curious young man in search of information. Besides, I thought at the time, I could perhaps find another, similar case if I put my mind and resources to it. Mary E. was the sysop for a small Chicago-based bulletin board system in 1992 when she first encountered Smile.jpg and her life changed forever. She and Terrence had been married for only 5 months. Mary was one of an estimated 400 people who saw the image when it was posted as a hyperlink on the BBS, though she is the only one who has spoken openly about the experience. The rest have remained anonymous, or are perhaps dead. In 2005, when I was only in 10th grade, Smile.jpg was first brought to my attention by my burgeoning interest in web-based phenomena. Mary was the most often cited victim of what is sometimes referred to as Smile.dog, the being Smile.jpg is reputed to display. What caught my interest, other than the obvious macabre elements of the cyber legend and my proclivity towards such things, was the sheer lack of information, usually to the point that people don't believe it even exists other than as a rumor or hoax. It is unique because, though the entire phenomenon centers on a picture file, that file is nowhere to be found on the internet. Certainly many photo-manipulated simulacra litter the web, showing up with the most frequency on sites such as the image board 4chan, particularly the /x/focused paranormal subboard. It is suspected these are fakes because they do not have the effect the true Smile.jpg is believed to have, namely sudden onset temporal lobe epilepsy and acute anxiety. This purported reaction in the viewer is one of the reasons the phantom-like smile.jpg is regarded with such disdain, since it is patently absurd, though depending on whom you ask, the reluctance to acknowledge smile.jpg's existence might be just as much out of fear as it is out of disbelief. Neither smile.jpg nor smile.dog is mentioned anywhere on Wikipedia, though the website features articles on such other, perhaps more scandalous shock sites as hello.jpg, or 2 Girls 1 Cup. Any attempt to create a page pertaining to smile.jpg is summarily deleted by any of the encyclopedia's many admins. Encounters with smile.jpg are the stuff of internet legend. Mary E.'s story is not unique. There are unverified rumors of smile.jpg showing up in the early days of Usenet, and even one persistent tale that in 2002 a hacker flooded the forums of humor and satire website Something Awful with a deluge of smile.dog pictures, rendering almost half the forum's users at the time epileptic. It is also said that in the mid to late 90s that smile.jpg circulated on Usenet and as an attachment of a chain email with the subject line "Smile. God loves you." Yet despite the huge exposure these stunts would generate, there are very few people who admit to having experienced any of them, and no trace of the file or any link has ever been discovered. Those who claim to have seen smile.jpg often weakly joke that they were far too busy to save a copy of the picture to their hard drive. However, all alleged victims offer the same description of the photo: a dog-like creature, usually described as appearing similar to a Siberian husky, illuminated by the flash of the camera, sits in a dim room, the only background detail that is visible being a human hand extending from the darkness near the left side of the frame. The hand is empty, but is usually described as beckoning. Of course, most attention is given to the dog, or dog creature, as some victims are more certain than others about what they claim to have seen. The muzzle of the beast is reputedly split in a wide grin, revealing 2 rows of very white, very straight, very sharp, very human-looking teeth. This is, of course, not a description given immediately after viewing the picture, but rather a recollection of the victims, who claim to have seen the picture endlessly repeated in their mind's eye during the time they are, in reality, having epileptic fits. These fits are reported to continue interminably, often while the victims sleep, resulting in very vivid and disturbing nightmares. These may be treated with medication, though in some cases it is more effective than others. Mary E., I assumed, was not on effective medication. That was why after my visit to her apartment in 2007 I sent out feelers to several folklore and urban legend-oriented news groups, websites, and mailing lists, hoping to find the name of a supposed victim of smile.jpg who felt more interested in talking about his experiences. For a time nothing happened, and at length I forgot completely about my pursuits, since I had begun my freshman year of college and was quite busy. Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March 2008. 2. jml@.com. From mary@.net. SUBJ, last summer's interview. Dear Mr. L. I am incredibly sorry about my behavior last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was no fault of yours, but rather my own problems that led me to act out as I did. I realized that I could have handled the situation more decorously, however, I hope you will forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. You see, for 15 years I have been haunted by Smile.jpg. Smile.dog comes to me in my sleep every night. I know that sounds silly, but it is true. There is an ineffable quality about my dreams, my nightmares, that makes them completely unlike any real dreams I have ever had. I do not move and do not speak. I simply look ahead, and the only thing ahead of me is the scene from that horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand, and I see Smile.dog. It talks to me. It is not a dog, of course, though I am not quite sure what it really is. It tells me it will leave me alone if only I do as it asks. All I must do, it says, is spread the word. That is how it phrases its demands. And I know exactly what it means. It wants me to show it to someone else. And I could. The week after my incident, I received in the mail a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was only a 3.5-inch floppy diskette. Without having to check, I knew precisely what was on it. I thought for a long time about my options. I could show it to a stranger, a co-worker. I could even show it to Terrence, as much as the idea disgusted me. And what would happen then? Well, if Smile.dog kept its word, I could sleep. Yet if it lied, what would I do? And who was to say something worse would not come for me if I did as the creature asked? So I did nothing for 15 years, though I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years Smile.dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years I have stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims on the BBS board where I first encountered Smile.jpg stopped posting. I heard some of them committed suicide. Others remained completely silent, simply disappearing off the face of the web. They are the ones I worry about the most. I sincerely hope you will forgive me, Mr. L, but last summer when you contacted me and my husband about an interview, I was near the breaking point. I decided I was going to give you the floppy diskette. I did not care if Smile.dog was lying or not, I wanted it to end. You were a stranger, someone I had no connection with, and I thought I would not feel sorrow when you took the diskette as part of your research and sealed your fate. Before you arrived I realized what I was doing, was plotting to ruin your life. I could not stand the thought, and in fact I still cannot. I am ashamed, Mr. L, and I hope that this warning will dissuade you from further investigation of Smile.jpg. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved, someone who will not hesitate to follow Smile.dog's orders. Stop while you are still whole. Sincerely, Mary E. Terrence contacted me later that month with the news that his wife had killed herself. While cleaning up the various things she'd left behind, closing email accounts and the like, he happened upon the above message. He was a man in shambles. He wept as he told me to listen to his wife's advice. He'd found the diskette, he revealed, and burned it until it was nothing but a stinking pile of blackened plastic. The part that most disturbed him, however, was how the diskette had hissed as it melted. Like some sort of animal, he said. I will admit that I was a little uncertain about how to respond to this. At first I thought perhaps it was a joke, with the couple belatedly playing with the situation in order to get a rise out of me. A quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. There was, of course, no mention of suicide in the article. I decided that, for a time at least, I would not further pursue the subject of Smile.jpg, especially since I had finals coming up at the end of May. But the world has odd ways of testing us. Almost a full year after I'd returned from my disastrous interview with Mary E., I received another email. To jml@.com. From elzahir82@.com. Subj, smile. Hello. I found your email address through a mailing list. Your profile said you are interested in Smile Dog. I have saw it. It is not as bad as everyone says. I have sent it to you here. Just spreading the word. Smiley face. The final line chilled me to the bone. According to my email client, there was one file attachment called, naturally, smile.jpg. I considered downloading it for some time. It was mostly likely a fake, I imagined, and even if it weren't, I was never wholly convinced of smile.jpg's peculiar powers. Mary E.'s account had shaken me, yes, but she was probably mentally unbalanced anyway. After all, how could a simple image do what smile.jpg was said to accomplish? What sort of creature was it that could break one's mind with only the power of the eye? And if such things were patently absurd, then why did the legend exist at all? If I downloaded the image, if I looked at it, and if Mary turned out to be correct, if Smile.dog came to me in my dreams demanding I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had, fighting against the urge to give in until I died? Or would I simply spread the word, eager to be put to rest? And if I chose the latter route, how could I do it? Whom would I burden in turn? If I went through with my earlier intention to write a short article about smile.jpg, I decided, I could attach it as evidence. And anyone who read the article, anyone who took interest, would be affected. And even assuming the smile.jpg attached to the email was genuine, would I be capricious enough to save myself in that manner? Could I spread the word? Yes. Yes, I could.
When you look upon me, your mind will begin to unravel and your sanity will fleet as your hopelessness and fear expand beyond your wildest nightmares. Every time you close your eyes, you will see me. Every time you try to cover your ears, you will hear me. And every time you tell yourself that I'm just a figment of your imagination, I will destroy something in your life to remind you that I am very much real. You humans have come to call me Smile Dog. And when you see my face, you better pass it along, or your very sanity will be ripped to shreds and your fleshy body will follow shortly. So spread the word about the Smile Dog.
I know of an old Romanian fairy tale, highly unpopular even in its earliest iterations. It might be based on a particular event, or perhaps it is an extrapolation from existing Slender Man stories. The translation I'm most familiar with goes a bit like this. Once upon a time there were twin girls, Stila and Sorina. They were brave little girls and had no fear of the dark, nor of spiders and other crawling things. Where other young ladies and even young boys would cower, Stila and Sorina would walk with their heads held high. They were good girls, obedient to their mother and father and to the word of God. They were the best children a mother could ask for, and this was their undoing. One day, Stila and Sorina were out with their mother gathering berries from the forest. Their mother bid them stay close to her, and they listened, as they were good children. The day was bright and clear, and even as they walked closer to the center of the forest, the light barely dimmed. It was nearly bright as noon when they found the tall man. The tall man stood in a clearing, dressed as a nobleman, all in black. Shadows lay over him, dark as a cloudy midnight. He had many arms, all long and boneless as snakes, all sharp as swords, and they writhed like worms on nails. He did not speak but made his intentions known. Their mother tried not to listen, but she could no more disobey the tall man than she could forget how to breathe. She walked into the clearing, her daughters shortly behind her. "Stila," she said, "take my knife, and cut a circle on the ground big enough to lie in." Stila, who was not afraid of the tall man, nor afraid of the quiver in her mother's voice, obeyed what her mother said. "Sorina," the mother said, "take the berries and spread them in the circle, and crush them underfoot until the juice stains the earth." Though Sorina wondered why her mother asked her to do such a thing, she obeyed, because she was a good girl. "Stila," the mother said, "lie in the circle." Stila, though she worried she might stain her clothes, did as her mother asked. "Sorina," the mother said, and bid Sorina cut her sister open with the knife. Sorina could not, would not. "Please," her mother said. "If you don't, it will be worse. So much worse." But Sorina could not, and she threw the knife away and ran home, crying. She hid under her bed, afraid for the first time in her life. She waited until her father came home from the fields, and told him of the terrible thing she had found in the woods. Her father comforted her and told her she would be safe. He went to the woods, his axe in hand, and as he commanded, she stayed by the hearth, waiting for his return. After some time she fell asleep. When she woke, it was to the sound of knocking on her door at the darkest hour of the night. "Who is there?" she said. "It is your father," the knocker said. "I don't believe you," said Sorina. "It is your sister," the knocker said. "It cannot be," said Sorina. "I am your mother," said the knocker, "and I told you it would be worse." And the door, locked tight before her father left, fell open as if it had been left ajar. And her mother stepped in, her sister's head clutched in one bloody hand, her father's in the other. "Why?" wept Sorina. "Because," said her mother, "there is no reward for goodness, there is no respite for faith, there is nothing but cold steel teeth and scourging fire for all of us. And it's coming for you now." And the tall man slid from the fire and clenched Sorina in his burning embrace. And that was the end of her. After weeks of unexplained murders, the ominous unknown killer is still on the rise. After little evidence has been found, a young boy states that he survived one of the killer's attacks and bravely tells his story. "I had a bad dream and I woke up in the middle of the night," says the boy. "I saw that for some reason the window was open, even though I remember it being closed before I went to bed. I got up and shut it once more. Afterwards, I simply crawled under my covers and tried to get back to sleep. That's when I had a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my bed. There, in the little ray of light, illuminating from between my curtains, were a pair of two eyes. These weren't regular eyes, they were dark, ominous eyes. They were bordered in black and, just plain out terrified me. That's when I saw his mouth. A long, horrendous smile that made every hair on my body stand up. The figure stood there, watching me. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he said it. A simple phrase, but said in a way only a madman could speak. He said, "Go to sleep." I let out a scream, that's what sent him at me. He pulled up a knife, aiming at my heart. He jumped on top of my bed. I fought him back, I kicked, I punched, I rolled around, trying to knock him off me. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife, it went into my dad's shoulder. The man probably would have finished him off, if one of the neighbors hadn't alerted the police. They drove into the parking lot and ran towards the door. The man turned and ran down the hallway. I heard a smash, like glass breaking. As I came out of my room, I saw the window that was pointing towards the back of my house was broken. I looked out it to see him vanish into the distance. I can tell you one thing, I will never forget that face. Those cold, evil eyes, and that psychotic smile. They will never leave my head. Police are still on the look for this man. If you see anyone that fits the description in this story, please contact your local police department. Jeff and his family had just moved into a new neighborhood. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they thought it would be best to live in one of those fancy neighborhoods. Jeff and his brother Lou couldn't complain though. A new, better house. What was not to love? As they were getting unpacked, one of their neighbors came by. "Hello," she said, "I'm Barbara, I live across the street from you." "Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and to introduce my son." She turns around and calls her son over. "Billy, these are our new neighbors." Billy said hi and ran back to play in his yard. "Well," said Jeff's mom, "I'm Margaret, and this is my husband Peter, and my two sons, Jeff and Lou." They each introduced themselves, and then Barbara invited them to her son's birthday. Jeff and his brother were about to object when their mother said that they would love to. When Jeff and his family are done packing, Jeff went up to his mom. "Mom, why would you invite us to some kid's party? If you haven't noticed, I'm not some dumb kid." "Jeff," said his mother, "we just moved here, we should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. Now, we're going to that party, and that's final. Jeff started to talk, but stopped himself, knowing that he couldn't do anything. Whenever his mom said something, it was final. He walked up to his room and plopped down on his bed. He sat there looking at his ceiling when suddenly, he got a weird feeling. Not so much pain, but a weird feeling. He dismissed it as just some random feeling. He heard his mother call him down to get his stuff, and he walked down to get it. The next day, Jeff walked downstairs to get breakfast and got ready for school. As he sat there, eating his breakfast, he once again got that feeling. This time it was stronger. It gave him a slight tugging pain, but he once again dismissed it. As he and Lou finished breakfast, they walked down to the bus stop. They sat there waiting for the bus, and then, all of a sudden, some kid on a skateboard jumped over them, only inches above their laps. They both jumped back in surprise. "Hey, what the hell?" The kid landed and turned back to them. He kicked his skateboard up and caught it with his hands. The kid seems to be about 12, 1 year younger than Jeff. He wears an Aeropostale shirt and ripped blue jeans. Well. It looks like we got some new meat. Suddenly, 2 other kids appeared. One was super skinny and the other was huge. "Well, since you're new here, I'd like to introduce ourselves. Over there is Keith." Jeff and Lou looked over to the skinny kid. He had a dopey face that you would expect a sidekick to have. "And he's Troy." They looked over at the fat kid. Talk about a tub of lard. This kid looked like he hadn't exercised since he was crawling. "And I," said the first kid, "am Randy." Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there is a small price for bus fare, if you catch my drift. Lou stood up, ready to punch the lights out of the kid's eyes when one of his friends pulled a knife on him. "Tusk, tusk, tusk. I had hoped you would be more cooperative, but it seems we must do this the hard way." The kid walked up to Lou and took his wallet out of his pocket. Jeff got that feeling again. Now, it was truly strong, a burning sensation. He stood up, but Lou gestured him to sit down. Jeff ignored him and walked up to the kid. "Listen here, you little punk, give back my bro's wallet or else." Randy put the wallet in his pocket and pulled out his own knife. "Oh? And what will you do?" Just as he finished the sentence, Jeff popped the kid in the nose. As Randy reached for his face, Jeff grabbed the kid's wrist and broke it. Randy screamed and Jeff grabbed the knife from his hand. Troy and Keith rushed Jeff, but Jeff was too quick. He threw Randy to the ground. Keith lashed out at him, but Jeff ducked and stabbed him in the arm. Keith dropped his knife and fell to the ground screaming. Troy rushed him too, but Jeff didn't even need the knife. He just punched Troy straight in the stomach and Troy went down. As he fell, he puked all over. Lou could do nothing but look in amazement at Jeff. "Jeff, how'd you?" was all he said. They saw the bus coming and knew they'd be blamed for the whole thing. So they started running as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked back and saw the bus driver rushing over to Randy and the others. As Jeff and Lou made it to school, they didn't dare tell what happened. All they did was sit and listen. Lou just thought of that as his brother beating up a few kids, but Jeff knew it was more. It was something scary. As he got that feeling, he felt how powerful it was, the urge to just hurt someone. He didn't like how it sounded, but he couldn't help feeling happy. He felt that strange feeling go away, and stay away for the entire day of school. Even as he walked home due to the whole thing near the bus stop, and how now he probably wouldn't be taking the bus anymore, he felt happy. When he got home, his parents asked him how his day was, and he said, in a somewhat ominous voice, it was a wonderful day. Next morning, he heard a knock at his front door. He walked down to find 2 police officers at the door, his mother looking back at him with an angry look. "Jeff, these officers tell me that you attacked 3 kids. That it wasn't regular fighting, and that they were stabbed." "Stabbed, son?" Jeff's gaze fell to the floor, showing his mother that it was true. "Mom, they were the ones who pulled the knives on me and Lou." "Son," said one of the cops, "we found 3 kids, 2 stabbed, 1 having a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses proving that you fled the scene. Now, what does that tell us?" Jeff knew it was no use. He could say him and Lou had been attacked, but then there was no proof it was not them who attacked first. They couldn't say that they weren't fleeing, because truth be told they were. So Jeff couldn't defend himself or Lou. "Son, call down your brother." Jeff couldn't do it since it was he who beat up all the kids. "Sir, it was me. I was the one who beat up the kids. Lou tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me." The cop looked at his partner and they both nod. "Well, kid, looks like a year in juvie." "Wait," says Lou. They all looked up to see him holding a knife. The officers pulled their guns and locked them on Lou. "It was me, I beat up those little punks. Have the marks to prove it?" He lifted up his sleeves to reveal cuts and bruises, as if he was in a struggle. "Son, just put the knife down," said the officer. Lou held up the knife and dropped it to the ground. He put his hands up and walked over to the cops. "No, Lou, it was me. I did it." Jeff had tears running down his face. Poor brother trying to take the blame for what I did. "Well, take me away." The police led Lou out to the patrol car. "Lou, tell them it was me. Tell them. I was the one who beat up those kids." Jeff's mother put her hands on his shoulders. "Jeff, please, you don't have to lie. We know it's Lou, you can stop." Jeff watched helplessly as the cop car speeds off with Lou inside. A few minutes later, Jeff's dad pulled into the driveway, seeing Jeff's face and knowing something was wrong. Son, what is it?" Jeff couldn't answer. His vocal cords were strained from crying. Instead, Jeff's mother walked his father inside to break the bad news to him as Jeff wept in the driveway. After an hour or so, Jeff walked back into the house, seeing that his parents were both shocked, sad, and disappointed. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't see how they thought of Lou when it was his fault. He just went to sleep, trying to get the whole thing off his mind. 2 days went by, with no word from Lou at JDC. No friends to hang out with. Nothing but sadness and guilt. That is until Saturday, when Jeff is woken up by his mother, with a happy, sunshiny face. "Jeff, it's the day," she said as she opened up the curtains and let light flood into his room. What? What's today? Asked Jeff as he stirs awake. Why, it's Billy's party. He was now fully awake. Mom, you're joking, right? You don't expect me to go to some kid's party after. There was a long pause. Jeff, we both know what happened. I think this party could be the thing that brightens up the past days. Now, get dressed. Jeff's mother walked out of the room and downstairs to get ready herself. He fought himself to get up. He picked out a random shirt and pair of jeans and walked downstairs. He saw his mother and father all dressed up, his mother in a dress and his father in a suit. He thought, why they would ever wear such fancy clothes to a kid's party. Son, is that all you're going to wear? Said Jeff's mom. Better than wearing too much, he said. His mother pushed down the feeling to yell at him and hid it with a smile. Now Jeff, we may be overdressed, but this is how you go if you want to make an impression, said his father. Jeff grunted and went back up to his room. I don't have any fancy clothes, he yelled downstairs. Just pick out something, called his mother. He looked around in his closet for what he would call fancy. He found a pair of black dress pants he had for special occasions and an undershirt. He couldn't find a shirt to go with it though. He looked around and found only striped and patterned shirts, none of which go with dress pants. Finally, he found a white hoodie and put it on. You're wearing that, they both said. His mother looked at her watch. Oh, no time to change. Let's just go, she said as she herded Jeff and his father out the door. They crossed the street over to Barbara and Billy's house. They knocked on the door and it appeared that Barbara, just like his parents, way overdressed. As they walked inside, all Jeff could see were adults, no kids. The kids are out in the yard. Jeff, how about you go and meet some of them, said Barbara. Jeff walked outside to a yard full of kids. They were running around in weird cowboy costumes and shooting each other with plastic guns. He might as well be standing in a Toys R Us. Suddenly a kid came up to him and handed him a toy gun and hat. Hey. Wanna play? He said. No kid. I'm way too old for this stuff. The kid looked at him with that weird puppy dog face. Please, said the kid. Fine, said Jeff. He put on the hat and started to pretend shoot at the kids. At first, he thought it was totally ridiculous, but then he started to actually have fun. It might not have been super cool, but it was the first time he had done something that took his mind off of Lou. So he played with the kids for a while, until he heard a noise. A weird rolling noise. Then it hit him. Randy, Troy, and Keith all jumped over the fence on their skateboards. Jeff dropped the fake gun and ripped off the hat. Randy looked at Jeff with a burning hatred. Hello, Jeff, is it? He said. We have some unfinished business. Jeff saw his bruised nose. I think we're even. I beat the crap out of you, and you get my brother sent to JDC. Randy got an angry look in his eyes. Oh no, I don't go for even, I go for winning. You may have kicked our asses that one day, but not today. As he said that, Randy rushed at Jeff. They both fell to the ground. Randy punched Jeff in the nose, and Jeff grabbed him by the ears and head-butted him. Jeff pushed Randy off of him and both rose to their feet. Kids were screaming and parents were running out of the house. Troy and Keith both pulled guns out of their pockets. "No one interrupts or guts will fly," they said. Randy pulled a knife on Jeff and stabbed it into his shoulder. Jeff screamed and fell to his knees. Randy started kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, Jeff grabs his foot and twists it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff stood up and walked towards the back door. Troy grabbed him. "Need some help?" He picks Jeff up by the back of the collar and throws him through the patio door. As Jeff tries to stand, he is kicked down to the ground. Randy repeatedly starts kicking Jeff, until he starts to cough up blood. "Come on, Jeff, fight me." He picks Jeff up and throws him into the kitchen. Randy sees a bottle of vodka on the counter and smashes the glass over Jeff's head. "Fight." He throws Jeff back into the living room. "Come on, Jeff, look at me." Jeff glances up, his face riddled with blood. "I was the one who got your brother sent to JDC. And now you're just gonna sit here and let him rot in there for a whole year. You should be ashamed." Jeff starts to get up. "Oh, finally, you stand and fight." Jeff is now to his feet, blood and vodka on his face. Once again he gets that strange feeling, the one in which he hasn't felt for a while. Finally, "He's up," says Randy as he runs at Jeff. That's when it happens. Something inside Jeff snaps. His psyche is destroyed, all rational thinking is gone, all he can do is kill. He grabs Randy and pile drives him to the ground. He gets on top of him and punches him straight in the heart. The punch causes Randy's heart to stop. As Randy gasps for breath, Jeff hammers down on him. Punch after punch, blood gushes from Randy's body, until he takes one final breath, and dies. Everyone is looking at Jeff now. The parents, the crying kids, even Troy and Keith. Although they easily break from their gaze and point their guns at Jeff. Jeff sees the guns trained on him and runs for the stairs. As he runs, Troy and Keith let out fire on him, each shot missing. Jeff runs up the stairs. He hears Troy and Keith follow up behind. As they let out their final rounds of bullets, Jeff ducks into the bathroom. He grabs the towel rack and rips it off the wall. Troy and Keith race in, knives ready. Troy swings his knife at Jeff, who backs away and bangs the towel rack into Troy's face. Troy goes down hard, and now all that's left is Keith. He is more agile than Troy though, and ducks when Jeff swings the towel rack. He dropped the knife and grabbed Jeff by the neck. He pushed him into the wall. A thing of bleach fell down on top of him from the top shelf. It burnt both of them and they both started to scream. Jeff wiped his eyes as best as he could. He pulled back the towel rack and swung it straight into Keith's head. As he lay there, bleeding to death, he let out an ominous smile. "What's so funny?" asked Jeff. Keith pulled out a lighter and switched it on. "What's funny," he said, "is that you're covered in bleach and alcohol." Jeff's eyes widened as Keith threw the lighter at him. As soon as the flame made contact with him, the flames ignited the alcohol in the vodka. While the alcohol burned him, the bleach bleached his skin. Jeff let out a terrible screech as he caught on fire. He tried to roll out the fire but it was no use, the alcohol had made him a walking inferno. He ran down the hall and fell down the stairs. Everybody started screaming as they saw Jeff, now a man on fire, drop to the ground, nearly dead. The last thing Jeff saw was his mother and the other parents trying to extinguish the flame. That's when he passed out. When Jeff woke, he had a cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see anything, but he felt a cast on his shoulder, and stitches all over his body. He tried to stand up, but he realized that there was some tube in his arm, and when he tried to get up it fell out, and a nurse rushed in. "I don't think you can get out of bed just yet," she said as she put him back in his bed and reinserted the tube. Jeff sat there, with no vision, no idea of what his surroundings were. Finally, after hours, he heard his mother. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked. Jeff couldn't answer though, his face was covered, and he was unable to speak. "Oh honey, I have great news." After all the witnesses told the police that Randy confessed of trying to attack you, they decided to let Lou go. This made Jeff almost bolt up, stopping halfway, remembering the tube coming out of his arm. "He'll be out by tomorrow, and then you two will be able to be together again." Jeff's mother hugs Jeff and says her goodbyes. The next couple of weeks were those where Jeff was visited by his family. Then came the day where his bandages were to be removed. His family members were all there to see it, what he would look like. As the doctors unwrapped the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on the edge of their seats. They waited until the last bandage holding the cover over his face was almost removed. "Let's hope for the best," said the doctor. He quickly pulls the cloth, letting the rest fall from Jeff's face. Jeff's mother screams at the sight of his face. Lou and Jeff's dad stare awestruck at his face. What happened to my face?" Jeff said. He rushed out of bed and ran to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and saw the cause of the distress. His face. It's horrible. His lips were burned to a deep shade of red. His face was turned into a pure white color, and his hair singed from brown to black. He slowly put his hand to his face. It had a sort of leathery feel to it now. He looked back at his family, then back at the mirror. "Jeff," said Lou, "it's not that bad." "Not that bad," said Jeff, "it's perfect." His family was equally surprised. Jeff started laughing uncontrollably. His parents noticed that his left eye and hand were twitching. Jeff, are you okay?" "Okay. I've never felt more happy." Hot, 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 hey, look at me. This face goes perfectly with me." He couldn't stop laughing. He stroked his face, feeling it, looking at it in the mirror. What caused this? Well, you may recall that when Jeff was fighting Randy, something in his mind, his sanity, snapped. Now he was left as a crazy killing machine, that is, his parents didn't know. "Doctor," said Jeff's mom, "is my son all right, you know? In the head?" "Oh yes, this behavior is typical for patients that have taken very large amounts of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back here, and we'll give him a psychological test." "Oh, thank you, doctor." Jeff's mother went over to Jeff. Jeff, sweetie, it's time to go. Jeff looks away from the mirror, his face still formed into a crazy smile. "K mommy, ha, ha, hey 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 hey." His mother took him by the shoulder and took him to get his clothes. "This is what came in," said the lady at the desk. Jeff's mom looked down to see the black dress pants and white hoodie her son wore. Now they were clean of blood and now stitched together. Jeff's mother led him to his room and made him put his clothes on. Then they left, not knowing that this was their final day of life. Later that night, Jeff's mother woke to a sound coming from the bathroom. It sounded as if someone was crying. She slowly walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrendous sight. Jeff had taken a knife and carved a smile into his cheeks. "Jeff, what are you doing?" asked his mother. Jeff looked over to his mother. "I couldn't keep smiling, Mommy. It hurt after a while. Now I can smile forever." Jeff's mother noticed his eyes, ringed in black. "Jeff, your eyes." His eyes were seemingly never closing. "I couldn't see my face. I got tired and my eyes started to close. I burned out the eyelids so I could forever see myself, my new face." Jeff's mother slowly started to back away, seeing that her son was going insane. "What's wrong, Mommy? Aren't I beautiful?" "Yes, son," she said, "yes you are. Let me go get Daddy, so he can see your face." She ran into the room and shook Jeff's dad from his sleep. "Honey, get the gun She stopped as she saw Jeff in the doorway, holding a knife. "Mommy, you lied." That's the last thing they hear as Jeff rushes them with the knife, gutting both of them. His brother Lou woke up, startled by some noise. He didn't hear anything else, so he just shut his eyes and tried to go back to sleep. As he was on the border of slumber, he got the strangest feeling that someone was watching him. He looked up, before Jeff's hand covered his mouth. He slowly raised the knife ready to plunge it into Lou. Lou thrashed here and there trying to escape Jeff's grip. "Shhhhhhh," Jeff said. "Just go to sleep."